Definitely, yeah. And I'm excited that we've got so many friends from all over the world over here as well. So I'm quite keen to actually bring on our speaker, Rabia. And before I do that, I mean, just a quick introduction. She is from the Green Deen Tribe, and we did have Green Deen Tribe here before as well. But just a quick introduction to Rabia Mali. She's a medical herbalist, a musician, and a community organizer, and she studied herbalism at the University of Westminster in 2011, and then traveled to Ghana, where she continued learning with a local herbalist, reigniting her love for nature with an understanding of the symbiotic relationships between nature and humans. She's also the founder of the Green Deen Tribe. So it's a space that facilitates Muslim women and young girls in developing their connection to the divine through nature. So without further ado, we'd like to invite Rabia onto the virtual post. Assalamu alaikum, Rabia. Can you hear us? You're on mute.
Yeah, so it's you would think after how many months of living Zoom I would get that. But yeah, walaikum salam, walaikum salam. Thank you for that introduction.
And so we're gonna hand the podium over to you for about 30 minutes, and then we can go to questions and answers as well. But just keen to know as well, how are you finding the situation at the moment as well, just before we get into it, and just generally around the conversations we were having.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's been a really interesting. This lockdown has been very it feels very natural this time around because we're in the kind of colder months anyway. So I think for me, I've kind of been more inclined to stay in anyway, and this is the time that I would retreat. But I'm missing just like being outdoors a bit more than I would do. That I think that's the main thing, and I'm getting really tired of. As much as lovely as it is to see everyone's faces, I think I'm just getting really tired of like the electronic aspect of everything. It's really draining. I just want to hug somebody, you know what I mean? Like it's really but yeah, alhamdulillah. I'm in a good place, alhamdulillah.
That's good to hear.
Great. So okay. Yeah. We are all waiting. We're really excited. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for kind of creating such a space to kind of have this conversation and to have this. I really want to call it definitely a conversation because although there's definitely aspects of this that I will be kind of talking at you, there's definitely aspects of it that I really want to welcome kind of conversation, and by all means, please use the chat or whatever means to kind of just chime in to see so that we're having this two-way conversation, inshallah. But I think before we kind of jump into kind of really the discussion, I would like to just kind of ground ourselves a bit, or ground myself, and you're more than welcome to kind of join me as I do this. I find particularly now that I've spent the whole year pretty much on the computer, I'm finding these moments of stillness and these moments of just taking a breath really, really powerful and really, really important. So I invite you to join me in whatever capacity feels comfortable for you. We're going to actually take 7 deep breaths. If it feels comfortable for you, you can close your eyes. You can put your hand on your heart or your stomach so you can feel your stomach going in and out, but whatever feels right, whatever feels comfortable for you. I would encourage for you to breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth, and we're just going to do this 7 times. So take a deep breath. And we're going to breathe out through our mouth. And particularly as we're breathing out, if there's any tension in your shoulders or any tension anywhere in our bodies, is to find that as a moment of release as well. And we're just going to do that another 5 times. Okay, so after our 7 breaths, I'm just going to do the 7 ayahs of opening. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين آمين يا رب العالمين. Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for joining me with that. It's great. It's great before I kind of go into a process of just talking, where I'm not going to do a lot of breathing. I'll just be like, so bismillah. Just to kind of introduce and kind of set the intention for today. Inshallah, I'm making that intention to kind of, like I said, have a conversation, to talk a little bit about the work that I do with the Green Deen Tribe particularly, and also to kind of start to explore some of the principles that are involved regarding some of the work that we're doing, with a little bit more of a conversation regarding stewardship. And there's this I must say, normally when we have this conversation, particularly when we do it at our retreat, this is actually like half a day. So as much as I just want to encourage that this is just like an introduction, and not even an introduction, it's just like a tiny raindrop in an ocean. So do bear that in mind, that inshallah, the intention is that we can go away with a bit more of a connection to nature, and have a bit more of an awareness of the way that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is with nature, and how we can use nature to strengthen our connection with him ﷺ and with Allah. And that's what our intention is for today. Yes, I feel like I don't need to introduce myself too much, because that was a really wonderful introduction. So thank you so much for that, Adnan. But yeah, just to follow up with that is that, yes, I was a herbalist, and a big part of that journey guided me to do the work that I'm doing now. Because the shift came from studying nature in a very kind of, what is this good for? What kind of chemical constituents does this have? To stepping into a space of understanding that there's a lot more that I can receive, and a lot more that I can actually give to nature. There's a bit more of an interaction. There's a bit more of a conversation, and that led me to do some work and like a year-long fellowship with St. Ethelberg's, which is called the Spiritual Ecology. I worked a lot with spiritual ecology, which is fascinating, I must say. It's so beautiful. It's a really beautiful way of looking at ecology. But what I found a lot was that a lot of the terminology, a lot of the philosophy behind it was rooted in Hinduism and Buddhism. And as wonderful as it was, I found myself, and I'm sure some of us find this anyway, I'm finding myself in having to like constantly do like code switching, and having to switch from, okay, that's what they said, but what they mean in Islam. So it was kind of this constant kind of moving from like, okay. And what I came to realize is that actually the more I started to study that aspect, I realized that a lot of what I was looking for was already very rooted within Islam, and it was all there. And although we call ourselves the Green Deen, the Deen of Islam is like rooted in greenness. Like there's no need to separate it really. And that's where we came up with the Green Deen Tribe, and we set up what we basically did is every year for the past 3-4 years, apart from this year, we take a bunch of Muslim women, we take them out into nature, and we do collective work when it comes to collective prayer, collective meditation in nature. We pray together, eat together, we prepare food together, and it's a space of connecting us back to the wild nature, connecting us back to a sense of nature, particularly for those of us that are quite kind of urban. And by doing that, not only is that healing for ourselves, it kind of stepped us into a space of really connecting to Allah and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. I must say that this didn't start out being a female kind of a space, like a female space with nature, and I don't think that that's what we want this to exclusively be, but that's basically what it is at the moment, and that's what we're doing at the moment, inshallah. So the key part of it was kind of using our heads, our hands, and our hearts. A big part of what we do is a lot to do with creativity. So you can see that we work a lot when it comes to sacred geometry, which is a big reverence when it comes to nature and understanding Allah and nature. And we spent a lot of solo time and together, but solo time in nature. So being in nature in silence and witnessing what is happening. A big part of that is understanding how to read the signs of Allah. We use a lot of this work, and we use a lot of the principles, the principles of Green Deen, the Green Deen Tribe, and it kind of tends to be, we've kind of narrowed it down to 7, which is a oneness, the purpose or your essence, balance, reverence, stewardship, and service. And the last principle, we would always get each group to kind of give us that last principle. So I would, inshallah, as we come to the end of my sharing section, that's one question that I would love to hear from you, or something that you can maybe even post in the chat now, actually. What would be that last principle? What would be that last aspect of creating communion, creating connection to earth? Because there's no, I mean, I can give you examples of what we had, but maybe I'll share that at the end. But it's a way of keeping that 7. 7's a really beautiful number. So I'll run through really briefly some of the principles, and we'll spend a bit more time on the stewardship aspect. But oneness, it's this idea of course, oneness of Allah, that there is nothing but Allah. Everything in creation comes from a source, comes from what they would say in sacred geometry, a nukta, which is like the center point. It comes from that point, and everything is coming from that point, and everything is coming from Allah. And that helps us to have this understanding that, particularly in our relationship with nature, everything that we're witnessing in nature is coming. It's a reflection of Allah. It's from Allah, right? That what we can see, that what we can't see, it's all from Allah. And I think what the powerful thing about that, and I use this principle, this idea of oneness, even when I teach herbal medicine, and that's not even in the line of teaching anything in an Islamic perspective. All of my students, whenever I teach herbal medicine, we start off with this idea of oneness, right? It has to be oneness in order to step into alternative medicine and natural therapies. So you have to have this aspect of oneness. When you have this aspect of oneness, when you begin to understand that everything is from Allah, it becomes very difficult to witness a sunset and be like, oh, that's very beautiful. Instead of seeing a sunset, you're seeing that this is one of the signs of Allah, right? You're seeing that there's a revelation in this sunset. There's a name of Allah that has been manifested in this sunset, and Allah is asking me to look at this sunset and witness that, rather than like, wow, cool, mashallah, let me take a selfie. You know what I mean? Like really in that way of, that's not us witnessing it. And when we look back at our shahada is, I bear witness. And this way of being with nature is really witnessing Allah and the manifestations of Allah in nature, and understanding that, and having this understanding that everything in nature has a particular purpose, has a particular essence, including ourselves. And part of honoring that creation is by honoring that purpose and essence and getting closer to that. One of my teachers said, and I extended this to nature, he said, every one of us, every heart in creation has been stamped with the name of Allah, right? Has been stamped and embedded with the name of Allah, a different name of Allah. And part of their purpose, and that becomes their fitrah, right? But part of their purpose is to manifest that name, is to act out that name, is to be an embodiment of that particular characteristic, whether that be through your work life, I don't know, home life, whatever that means, that becomes your purpose. Then we step into a space of reverence, like I mentioned, this idea of deep awe and deep understanding and deep love and deep just like, oh, Ya Allah, just really witnessing that. And this is a really beautiful thing, because this actually happens 2 ways, right? So you have this reverence of us revering creation, like revering what we're seeing, like the moon and the stars, and witnessing this and being like, oh, this is so beautiful, mashallah, this reminds me of Allah, look, this reminds me of how beautiful Allah is. And then on the other side, we actually have creation praising Allah, and there's so many different examples of that in the Quran. It's constantly stating how Allah is constantly praising, how creation is constantly praising Allah, how the sun and the moon and the stars are constantly in praise of Allah. And even if we look at the example of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we know that so much of the creation that was around the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in reverence, was actually revering him. They witnessed what they saw in the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they were able to give salams to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They would yearn to be near the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there's so many examples of this. The beautiful one is that of the date tree that was yearning to be next to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to a point that this date tree yearned so much that its wailing could be heard by everybody that was in the Jummah at that moment. Right, so everybody was turning around like, what's going on? What's this noise? And this date tree was wailing and saying, yeah, oh Prophet of Allah, please stand by me. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam went and embraced that tree, and how the stones would praise the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how the tree would bow itself to kind of give shade to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how the clouds would move to shade the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And these may be examples that maybe some of us might be more familiar with, but when there's an entire book, right, an entire book dedicated to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his relationship with nature. And when you read some of these stories, you're just like, oh, this is insane, how the trees would get uprooted and actually move towards the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is one of my so this is an example of balance, mizan, this idea of everything in creation, knowing all of this, the purpose, etc. It moves into a space of balance. It moves into a space of kind of symphony and harmony. And this is incredibly important when we start talking about stewardship. But there's basically one of the surahs that I would recommend for this is just basically Surah Rahman. All of Surah Rahman is speaking about the balance. It's speaking about how everything in creation is so beautiful, and Allah has created everything as a mercy. Allah is so merciful, but everything is in the perfect balance. And part of our stewardship is about maintaining that balance as well. And service. I'm not going to go too much into service because I feel like it's kind of, I think we will have an understanding of what that can look like, and a big part of that is our stewardship. So I'm going to stop sharing in like maybe 2 minutes because I really want to see what's being said in the chat particularly. But one of the biggest conversations we have regarding stewardship is number one is actually that the language that we're using, right? Is that language stewardship. And what the negative connotations that we have, some negative connotations that we have with that term. So for a very long time, for me, stewardship had a very old kind of patriarchal dominance aspect when it comes to environment. It was this idea of we own the earth, like Allah gave it to us and we're here, we have dominion over it, which I know in some translations that is, we have dominion over the earth, we have dominance over the earth. And I looked at that and I was like, I don't know if that's really what I'm understanding from what it's being. Well, I don't know. But I think it's really important for us to understand the term stewardship is just a language thing. Khalifa has even better translations than stewardship. I think there's another one. Is it vicegerent? I think it's vicegerent is another term that's sometimes used. But that doesn't really go into my vocabulary, so I don't use it. But stewardship, caretaker, it's probably language that maybe some of us are a bit more comfortable with. This one ayah, I'm just going to move us. He is the one who has placed us as successors on the earth and elevated some of you in rank over others. Right? So he may test you with what he's given you. Surely your Lord is swift in punishment, but he is certainly all forgiving and merciful. Really powerful ayah, because it basically sums up what stewardship is for us. It's been a trust. It's an amanah that Allah has given us. For us to kind of take care of an amanah. The earth is a trust, our bodies are a trust, our family is a trust. Everything that Allah gives us is a sense of trust, and we will be held accountable. Like this is what this ayah is saying. Like it's not just like, hey, this is what you've been given, you're very honored, mashallah, you're khalifas, mashallah, like you're elevated in some rank, mashallah. It's like, yes, this is what we've given you, but you're going to be held accountable, and it's a test for you. So if you don't honor that position, you're going to be held accountable. And I think this is really important for us to kind of remember that yes, that honor comes with account. What's that Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. There you go. It's a lot more deeper than we kind of give it the weight of. And that kind of is followed by this particular ayah, which is saying Allah offered the trust of the heavens and the earth and the mountains, but they all declined to bear it, being fearful of it. But humanity assumes it, for they are truly wrongful to themselves and ignorant of the consequences. This is a really there's this awareness that as an amanah that Allah has given us, that it's a big responsibility. There's going to be big consequences, but also this reminds me that Allah doesn't give us more than what we can bear. And I do honestly believe that that trust and that honor of being a Khalifa, although sometimes when you look at our environment, and particularly now when you look at the environmental crisis, you're kind of like, wow, humans are really, well, as creations, we're most destructive ever. Like we don't know how to create. We don't know how to make anything beautiful. The reality is Allah would have not given that to us unless we were able to carry it, And I particularly think of that because during lockdown, in the first lockdown particularly, you started to see nature thrive so much in different areas. But it gives me hope to know that Allah wouldn't have given this to us if we weren't able to bear it. So I'm asking this question. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm asking this question as we step into this conversation of stewardship, is how do you, from wherever you are, but how do you steward the earth, right? And I must say there's no textbook answer to this. And I think that's very important for us to understand that when we talk about stewardship looks like different things to different people. But how do you at home, when I use that language, use those words, how do you, on a daily basis, weekly, monthly, how do you steward the earth? I'm going to jump into the chat. And forgive me if there's anything else that's been said in it. I haven't been looking. Yeah, how do you steward the earth? So I've got, oh yeah, we watch what we consume. Yep, we watch what you consume. That's incredibly important. Recycling, yes, alhamdulillah. Blessed to have a garden, turning it into a food forest. Yes, mashallah. Yeah, to give it new lease of life. Yes. So this idea of kind of, what I would say kind of cultivating as well. To me, it reminds me of another hadith. Your body has a right over you. Yes. Similar to that is gifted. Yes. Use what you already have before considering more. Yes. This idea of waste is incredibly important. Give everything a second use. Composting, education, reflection, recycling, recycle, reuse, repurpose, avoid wastage. Try and teach others. Yes, subhanAllah, this is really beautiful because this is another way of being of service, right? Being a steward is somebody who's being of service, because ultimately you can't be a steward if you're not a person of service, and that's really important for us to remember as well. And that service comes from that manifests in different ways. Lead by example, gently encourage. Yeah, this is a really another conversation of how we do that, how we do lead by example, because I know that can be quite, environmentalism doesn't have the greatest track record when it comes to leading people gently. It can also sometimes be quite overwhelming. Using and consuming things intentionally. Yes. I would love to. I'm loving all of these examples, and I will say like that all of them are definitely in sync with this idea of stewardship. If I may, I'm just going to add a few more, and then what I will do is, inshallah, we can actually maybe open for Q&A or comments, whether there's questions or just kind of conversation topics. I'm happy to kind of do that. A big part of our stewardship, and I must say this is where I'm not going to use the slides because I absolutely hate using slides because I can't see anybody. So now I'm going to actually just look, and it'd be much better for me. But one of the really prophetic ways, when we speak about prophetic, the sunnah of stewardship, ultimately all those principles that we mentioned, they will be manifested in a different way. And the sunnah of stewardship is one of the key ways of tapping into that. Firstly is knowing the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? It's so important for us to study seerah. And if you can find somebody, I always say, if you find people who love the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam are the best people to learn the seerah from, because it's no longer somebody sitting there telling you a story. It turns into reality. Like as they're telling you the seerah, as they're telling you the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you actually can, your senses start to become alive. So I really would recommend that as a key thing before we step into any trying to follow the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We really need to know the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We need to try and seek love towards the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But one of the key things that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam always kind of spoke about is conservation. And that conservation as a general thing, particularly as of the example of water. And we know of that hadith of, even if you are by the flowing stream of a water, do not waste the water in your wudu, right? And this is incredibly important, particularly with water, because water is sent from the heavens. And in the Quran, it says water is sent from the heavens as a means of nourishing, but cleansing. And I always think like, oh my gosh, if it's something, if somebody gave us something, like if somebody gives me something tomorrow, like, I don't know, a gift, and was like, this is from the heavens, like the amount that I'm going to honor that, and I just think, my gosh, mashallah. So yeah, water being as a means of honoring of heavens, and to conserve that, and particularly I think of wudu. We used to make jokes about. I mean, many years ago, we had a drought in this country. I don't know if maybe some of us are old enough to remember. There was a bit of a drought in this country, and they were like, you can't use the what do they call those, the water hoses and everything. And we sat there and we're like, they're going to come for the Muslims. They're going to be like, you're making wudu 5 times a day. This is what's causing the drought. But and I also remember how, I also understand like the more water you use, the better your wudu is. And then I came across a video of an amazing sheikh, mashallah, making wudu from like a mukhtar, like literally like a cup of water, maybe a little bit bigger than this, making a full wudu with a cup of water from this. And I just thought, yeah, you know what, when I think about the prophetic wudu, I don't know what I've been doing for the past however many years, but I don't think it was kind of like the way that I'm doing it, where the water's like, I come out looking like I've had the ghusl instead of wudu. So these sort of things, it's really important to kind of step into that space as well. Also, not to be of those who are wasters. Those are waste, people of waste, because people of waste are very close to shaitan. And the Prophet Muhammad said, those that waste are not loved, and it makes me think, particularly when it comes to our food, when it comes to our water particularly, but food particularly, and this is one thing, and this is one of the reasons why we worked with Ramadan tent beforehand, and inshallah, maybe in the next 2 years, maybe it will manifest, is this idea of particularly during Ramadan, our food wastage in Ramadan, and how that actually increases during Ramadan rather than decreases. So this idea of food, and also this idea of conservation, and that's kind of really stretching to the idea of even the Prophet Muhammad and the Muslims, particularly those in Morocco, who were amongst the first to really implement this idea of zones that were there to conserve. Right, so there were zones in areas where you weren't allowed to hunt, that you would have to leave the particular animals. The Prophet Muhammad forbade killing animals for no reason. Certain animals bigger than a particular size for no reason, and also forbade killing things like ants and bees. And when we look at it now, we have an understanding why such insects would have been protected as well. The second thing would be to cultivate, and I think somebody said about having a garden, so getting out there and kind of being with the garden and creating and growing and planting. Not only is it good for us mentally and emotionally, and particularly energetically when it comes to kind of really helping with our mood, it's also incredibly powerful when it comes to honoring that gift of cultivating for those that have come. And it's a service as well. Reverence, we spoke about reverence and about how bringing nature into our homes. I think just before we started, we were talking about how much nature do we actually have in our homes. We've got plants, but how much actual nature are we bringing into the home? My teacher would always say, bring plants in because plants are doing dhikr. And he told me a story of an old-time saint. He wanted to test his students. So he asked them all to kind of go out and bring back a flower, right? So like all the students went out. Let's say 4 students went out and 3 of them came back, and they were like these beautiful kind of bouquets of flowers, like smelled incredible. They were the brightest of colors, the most vibrant flowers ever. And then they had the last student that came back, and he presented to his sheikh like this really dead kind of looking wilting flower. And everybody was like, oh my gosh, how can you present this to the sheikh? And he said, you know what, sheikh, I'm really, really sorry. I really try to find the most beautiful flower, but every flower that I came across was in a state of dhikr, right? Every flower that I came across was in a state of dhikr. And this is the only flower that I could find that had finished its dhikr. So this is the only flower I could feel that I could present to you. And I just thought that was very beautiful. And that's what in the work that we do, we try and connect to that sense of reverence of witnessing, right? Of witnessing these sort of things. I'm not saying that we're going to go out tomorrow and you're going to start hearing the trees do a dhikr. Maybe you might, subhanAllah, but we're trying to say that this is the way that the Prophet Muhammad was also with nature as well. And I just think as a last one, I will share like a last 2 is reflection. I think if we can do with the reflection is this idea of this power of sitting and being in contemplation with nature, but then also actually learning, right? Like every time I sit there and I watch, I don't know, an animal documentary, a plant documentary, that you're in this constant idea of like, subhanAllah, like, how can people not believe? How can you not believe? Which of the favors of our Lord do we deny? And it's this idea of actually learning, seeking out what is the process of this, seeking out what is the means of this, as well, inshallah. Yeah, trees are worshipping Allah by the providing nesting plants. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Bismillah. And so I will end with that. I will end with this idea of being in a state of reflection, and being in that state of constantly being seeking those signs of Allah, and not letting our hands be a means of destruction, and not letting our hearts be a means of destruction, inshallah. But yeah, Bismillah. I'm really keen to kind of step into a space of conversation, and if there are any, I want to shy away from, I mean, if there's questions, but if there's anything that anybody wanted to share, then Bismillah, I'm also kind of game for that as well. But thank you.
Thank you, Rabia. Thank you so much for that. I really enjoyed that. I know our audience did too as well, simply from the fact that the comments are honestly popping off. There's so many things coming in, and I think it's important because it shows how passionate a lot of people are, and also how timely this agenda is, in a lot of people's lives at the moment. So the plan for now is we have about 20 minutes to go through question and answers, but I think what's starting to become very clear is there's going to be a few questions coming in for sure, and there's actually quite a few discussion points, and I have one myself that I want to go through a little bit later on as well. But first, I know Farah has a question, so Farah, do you want to start with that?
Thank you, Adnan. And before I do, Rianne says, we've got so many positive comments, Rabia. Shams is really happy. Rianne is saying she loves your enthusiasm, and it's so necessary in the world, especially now. And it's really interesting you mentioned that last point about plants and nature. So my mother, whenever she used to travel, and went pre-COVID, obviously, she'd be away a couple of months visiting like her family, and she always, first thing she'd phone us, like, "Okay, Mummy, how are you? Like, we're so happy to talk to you. This is great." And she's like, "Have you looked after my plants? How are my plants?" And we're like, "Hold on, Mummy, what about us?" We used to say to her, "Yeah, we really, really miss you." She said, "But she said, I know that, you can look after yourself, but the plants can't look after themselves." And, even when I went to university, she said to me, "Oh, Farah, you need a plant." I was like, "Are you sure, Mummy? I don't know if I need a plant." And she's like, no, yes, you do, because, when you get lonely, you can talk to the plants. And, mashallah, she's so in tune with nature. She has, like, Savannah, ridiculously green fingers. So when you said that, that really, really, struck me, and, how important it is too. And that's, the way she's taught us, to respect nature, to care for nature, and to also, appreciate the cycles of nature, like the cycles of life, as is mentioned in the Quran. And you speak about, stewardship and, being a Khalifa, and, you're saying that, stewardship is trust, and it's about, looking after your body and nature and everything, and, we're all accountable for it, which I absolutely agree with you. And with regard, to our audience, everyone who we have here, what we're going through difficult times right now. Everyone is around the world. There's a lot of uncertainty. And what small actions can we take, during these difficult times to be, Khalifas or caretakers of our bodies? Because we've spoken about the environment. So, just tips you could give, everyone in these difficult times that we're having right now.
That's really beautiful. Yeah, that's really beautiful. Yeah. That's really beautiful. I would just about your plants, I would definitely recommend everyone should have a plant, even if you don't feel like you're green fingered. Do get a plant. Start off with like a really easy, I don't know, a herb which is really easy to grow, and just speak to it every day. And regarding extending that trust and recognizing our body as a trust, I particularly as the work I do as a herbalist, I could go on forever and ever, because there's so much that we do that doesn't honor our bodies, from the food that we eat, from our physical activity, but then also even the emotions that we particularly ponder on and we hold in our bodies. But basic thing, particularly during this lockdown, is water. I don't know if anyone else is finding that, but particularly water during these winter and colder months is water. Is to make sure we're drinking and keeping ourselves hydrated. particularly during the colder months as well, in the autumn and the winter, is to actually be introducing much more warming foods. So a lot more kind of root vegetables, carrots, potatoes, anything that's coming from roots would be really helpful for us to be really kind of being with at the moment as well. Staying away from things, too much cold foods. That includes too much dairy and too much cold refrigerated water, too much salad foods. A lot of salads tend to be quite cooling. So everything that's warming, we kind of want to bring up. And smile. There's a practice of smiling 30 seconds a day. It's sunnah, but then what it actually does to the brain is actually really powerful as well, to smile just randomly, like just 30 seconds a day. You don't even need, could be in the middle of a cry, but just stop and smile. So that's what I'd recommend. I don't know if anyone else has anything that they've kind of started to manifest as a means of honoring their bodies, or stewarding their bodies and stewarding their surroundings during this time.
Yeah, we'd be really interested to hear that. Please drop it in the chat box. I know I've started doing meditation a lot more as well the last few weeks, which I found really useful. So yeah, please drop everything in the chat box. I'm gonna thank you, Rabia. I'm gonna hand over to Adnan now because he's got some really exciting points as well. So over to you, Adnan.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Farah. And thank you, Rabia, as well. So first, I think there's three things I want to cover. First thing is there's a question coming in. So I want to address this one as soon as possible. So Selma asks, what's the name of the book that speaks of the Prophet's relationship with nature?
Who asked that one? Sorry.
I think this was Selma.
Yes.
I will. I'm gonna have to give that to Selma. I'll give that to Selma personally because I can't remember the book at the moment, and I would also try and maybe post it on the Green Deen Instagram. It's actually a book that's in Arabic and it hasn't been translated fully into English, but it's a really, really beautiful book. I will find that for you, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you. Okay. So there's a discussion point I want to discuss in a moment, just my thoughts around, resourcefulness and that sort of stuff. But before I come into that, there's a really interesting fact I learned the other day. And I'm just going to pose this question out to everyone as well, and just be happy to sort of, put it in the comments. But what's the so the average British person, how quickly do they consume more carbon dioxide than several countries in Africa? And these countries include places like Rwanda, Ethiopia, and Malawi. So how quickly, in terms of weeks, months, or year, do we consume more carbon dioxide, so emit more carbon dioxide than the whole annual carbon dioxide emission of a whole country? Does anyone want to take a guess, or you can put your comments in the comment section as well?
You know what, Adnan? I'm going to go with, so that's where my family's from. So I'm going to go with either days or weeks, because I know Rwanda is doing a lot of very, very exciting work in becoming carbon neutral and with regards to their energy as well. So they are really leading the way in that part of the world in Central Africa. But yeah, we have here 3 weeks.
So we've got 3 weeks, yeah. We've got 4
Somebody
months.
said. So I can go in weeks or days from my point of view.
It's 2 weeks. It's 2 weeks. The average British person emits more carbon dioxide in the first 2 weeks of this year than a citizen of any one of the 7 African nations does in the entire year. And this is a finding by Oxfam, and I found this incredible. I thought, wow, 2 weeks, and we've emitted more carbon dioxide. So this was a conversation we were having at work at one point, and working for a sustainability consultancy means that we look into all of these sort of things and discuss, how do we then reduce our own personal carbon footprint. And the discussion I was sort of thinking to myself afterwards was with my mum, with my granddad and grandparents especially, a lot of the simple things like, you get a hole in your trousers, you don't buy a new trouser, you fix that hole. If you have anything else, it's about being resourceful. And this whole sense about fast fashion, and I'm not sure if anyone saw on Black Friday, but there were a lot of fast fashion labels I'm not going to mention that were selling clothes for pennies. And it questions, like, hang on a second, what's going on over here? And so the question and the discussion I want to have over here is, how do we actually enable, you know, the new generation now that are used to fast fashion, getting things quickly, and not being resourceful, and not thinking about actually amending our own clothes, or buying secondhand things, and building that habit. Because I think that's the key thing that we've lost from generations coming down. My grandma had her own sewing machine, and she was very, you know, very resourceful to basically amend her clothes, you know, keep the things she's kept it for many years in really good condition, shoes, all that sort of stuff. And I think I feel like, you know, as we've gone down the generation, we're a lot more used to convenience. We want convenience. I don't want to, you know, sit down and sew for 2-3 hours. I just want to buy it quickly. But that's not the point. The point is, you know, being resourceful. How can we actually enable ourselves to be a lot more resourceful? And I want to have that discussion. Like, what are your points? And Rabia, for sure, as well. Like, what are your thoughts and processes, and how can we do that? You know, how can we encourage ourselves to build that habit? Secondhand, reuse, all that sort of stuff.
We've got some comments in the chat box as well, Rabia, so you can check those.
Yeah. Somebody said about charity shops are full of gems, and it's true, they are, as well as buying from secondhand, etc., etc. And 100%, I think I'm actually more in a space of being quite positive about this. Because although as on a global scale, on a mass scale, there is this idea of kind of capitalism and fast fashion, and it's incredibly destructive. I do also, compared to when I was a child, the idea of you know, swap shops, and the idea of vintage clothes, secondhand shopping and reusing is it's becoming much more trendy, right? And I'm not going to lie, trends tend to kind of follow the capitalistic route, which is it tends to consume. But at this rate, it is still something that's a lot more appealing to a lot more younger people. As Muslims, if we just look at the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that's exactly how our elders were. That's exactly how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Can I share a positive example? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Bismillah, go for it.
Yeah, no, I didn't want to interrupt, but what I often find is that people have like a negative connotation with growing food, like, oh no, I'm not going to get my hands dirty, I'm just going to go to the shops and buy it. But people then don't reflect what that means. Like, what do you mean get your hands dirty? But also the implications in terms of sustainability being you know, middle class hippie thing. Well, actually, if you think about, you know, yes, you can go to the shop and buy it, but then that means you have to like earn that money, and especially in like the gig economy, it's so challenging. So a project that unfortunately currently doesn't exist, but I think could so easily be replicated, especially these days, is how about each in their own garden, or maybe have a collective garden, like matching, like some elderly who may not be able to garden, match them with young ones who don't have access to a garden, and then do it together, and then share the fruits of that. Because the reason the original project was set up wasn't with some big idea of like, you know, let's do some gardening. It was very much an economical thing. It was a group of I believe Pakistani immigrants and Irish immigrants who both missed their home veggies and also had very precarious sources of income. So they grew veggies together so that even if they didn't have a job for the day, they could still eat properly and be healthy to the next day, try again. And then they stopped doing it because the local supermarkets started selling their exotic veggies from home. But like still, especially now in like the gig economy, like why not indeed grow together, so that even if indeed you miss financial income, at least you've got you know, sustenance and can try again the next day. And it doesn't have to be like expensive in any way. Like each have seeds from one variety, and also if you share it, like, you know, one tends to the garden on the Monday and one on the Tuesday, you can, in that sense. So thought I'd share that as an example.
Thank you. No, that's really good. And this is the whole point as well. We want to definitely get, and if anyone else has any more discussions and points as well, 100%, you know, just jump on, because this is the whole idea of, you know, discussing, finding answers together, and how can we go about these things as well. The point about growing your own food. I remember working down in South London once near Epsom, and we, as a company, had our own allotment. We would go there and often, you know, grow pumpkins and all sorts of fruits and stuff as well. The whole element of getting your hands dirty was probably the most satisfying thing about it. When you finally grown the food and you eat that and you're like, wow, actually, this is what it takes to grow food, and this is what's involved. I would 100% encourage more people to do that themselves. It's actually really it's like a stress buster. I don't know if anyone else found that. It's like cooking, when you're cooking and you're chopping things. I really enjoy that sort of stuff. Farah, I want to get you involved more as well whilst I read some of the comments out, because there's a lot of conversation coming through.
Yeah, I can't. I know this is something we're both really, really passionate about. So whilst we do that, also I want to say is, guys, how easy is it to, grow your own stuff? I know so many people have been doing it in lockdown. You don't need much. My sister's in some ways she's repurposing plastic, plastic bottles and things like that, and using that to grow things. So, anytime we can do, it's easy. Start off, really small, as Rabia said, start off with a herb, go down to your local shop, get some seeds, isolate your own seeds, which, my mum does, for instance, from, the food that we eat and food that we enjoy. And it is really, really absolutely, so straightforward. And Rianne said, what about approaching mosques about mosque grounds into food forests? Yeah, we've got car parks, and obviously we've got rooftops as well, that are now being used to grow produce as well. And Adnan, I'm conscious of the time, but I also know that, you had a couple of extra points. So should we try and get those in?
Yeah, sure. So actually, one of the ones I want to share, I don't know if I can share a picture over here. I'm not sure how to do that, but it was a really interesting, again, topic at work we were doing. It was a presentation around sort of climate change and that sort of stuff. And there were 9 things you can do about climate change. And I don't know if I can share a picture. Let me see if I can post it.
If you have it already open, you can share screen it.
Let me see if I can.
Do you want to run through the points otherwise?
I'll run through the points, but if let me know if you can see my screen. It might need to zoom in or something as well.
Here we go. You might need to zoom into that.
Don't know if you can see that at all.
We can, but it's still really tiny. Can you?
It's really tiny.
It is really tiny. Just double click on it or make the screen.
It doesn't. Okay, I'm just gonna read it out instead. So the 9 points that I thought were really interesting. And apologies if you can't see this. I can't find the zoom button over here anywhere. But essentially, number 1 was make your voice heard by those in power. And I thought that was a really good one as well, because, collectively we can definitely come together, talk about this sort of stuff, use our influence, get involved with government initiatives and that sort of stuff, and definitely make it heard that this is an important thing that we have to get involved with. And I thought that's quite a good point. Often I always thought, who's going to listen? What's the point? But actually, this is gaining a lot of traction. And again, like I mentioned, working in environmental consultancy at the moment, we're getting so much demand from huge clients, and I'm talking about oil and gas all across, about them really driving home this point and saying, actually, yeah, we do need to do something. So this noise is becoming a lot louder now, and it just gets amplified more and more the more everyone else gets involved as well. Number 2 is eat less meat and dairy, and I think this was mentioned earlier as well about the dairy element. Again, there was another quote I saw, or a fact I saw, that one of the biggest polluters after meat is actually dairy, and it's cheese. It's cheese that's one of the biggest polluters, and so changing your diet not only might be better for your health, but also for the planet as well, and it can have a huge impact going forward. Cut back on flying. This I think makes sense. I mean, you're gonna have essential flights and that sort of stuff. That's fine. But flying is one of the biggest contributors towards carbon dioxide and sort of scope 3 is what it's called. So at work we do sort of emission footprints of companies. We look at where they're polluting their emissions from, and something called scope 3 is the supply chain and people taking flights, people traveling, that sort of stuff is definitely affected by that. Leave the car at home. I guess that makes sense. Swap it, use alternative methods, take a bike, go for a walk, that sort of stuff. Reduce your energy use and bills as well. And coupled to number 5, to the energy use and bills, is swap to a renewable energy provider instead. It's not mentioned there, but I think it's a really important point, because I think more and more now, there are definitely providers out there that are using wholesome renewable energy. People like Bulb, I think, is one of them, as well as a few others as well, Octopus, and there's more and more coming on board. So, these are things that we can definitely do as a collective being. Respect and protect green spaces. I think that that makes sense. Invest your money responsibly. So this is actually a really important one as well, where this is actually really important because you can get in touch with your pension providers, the people who you're putting your money in, and you can ask them, where is our money being invested? Who is it being invested in? And this is your responsibility because it's your money, it's your actions. Therefore, definitely get in touch and cut consumptions and waste. And that makes sense as well. So I just wanted to highlight these just before we go on to the Azan. I know there's a lot of messages coming through. I couldn't. Yeah, it just goes scrolling. But yeah, sorry. So I just wanted to highlight these. I thought this would be quite good to get involved and sort of think about these sort of things as well.
You still got your share screen on, Adnan. Are you right to?
Yeah, sorry. I'll just stop sharing that. I'll try and share the picture at some point if I can with the users over here. It might be beneficial. Apologies for the Zoom.
Rabia, what are your thoughts? We'd welcome your thoughts.
No, yeah, thank you so much for that, Adnan. I think it's really powerful, and it is incredibly important to have some practical kind of ways that we can kind of really manifest this. And I think it's really nice that we kind of wrap up and we end and we close with that as a physical manifestation. I also think that the beauty of it is to have it balanced, because I think there was a really beautiful comment in the chat that was saying that ultimately our actions, how we're behaving now towards the environment, is somewhat of a spiritual disease. And it's important that we don't do one without the other. So stepping into action without kind of looking at our spiritual state makes it gears towards kind of secular activism and secular environmentalism, which has taken God out. And it's the other way as well, where if we just sit and we kind of focus on just the kind of the theory of aspects and not manifest, it's not going to create change. So I would really encourage to kind of have both of the things, because ultimately our change and our action is going to be, we're moving towards action because we know that we're accountable to Allah, and that's what's going to make it sustainable. Nothing else will make this sustainable apart from our fear of Allah, because that's ultimately what's going to make us be able to do these things long term.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rabia. And thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm conscious we have a couple of minutes left until Adhan, so we'll be sharing the Adhan screen soon. Prior to that, we'll have a little bit of type of contemplation. Thank you again, everyone, for making this so interactive. It's been one of the most interactive sessions we've joined. Everyone's, some fantastic opinions, right?
Not enough time, yeah.
I know, not enough time.
No, definitely. No, I think it's been a really, really good talk. I know we've got a few seconds before the Azan starts as well, so I want to thank the speakers and all the audience for joining as well. It's been really engaging, really insightful, and inshallah this can help a lot of other people going forward as well. And as always, get in touch with us as well on social media, share, talk about this, and it's about helping the community and going forward together as well. So I hope everyone else has enjoyed this. Yeah, those are the last words from me before we go to the Azan.
Yeah, so we've got a few seconds until Adhan, so we're just going to spend a bit of time for some contemplation, and I'll hand over to Ahmad, who will be sharing our Adhan screen. So thank you again, and we'll say goodbye to you again afterwards. So over to you, Ahmad.
Also, I'll try and share the picture.
Yes, that'd be great.
Everyone for joining us as well, and thank you, Rabia, for giving us a really, really, really good topic to discuss, and also share our information knowledge there as well. And as always as well, for the audience for joining us, getting involved, making this one of the most engaging sessions we've ever had as well. And do definitely share this with your friends, family, share us on social media, talk about this, because we would only like to get this bigger and bigger and actually talk about these important issues more and more going forward. Farah, any last remarks?
I want to just thank everyone for joining us again. I am just going to try and get your picture up. So there's going to be a few
I can't believe I can't do that.
seconds. Let's see if we can actually smash this. Aha, okay. So hold on, give me a moment.
Go on, I believe in you. I tried so many times through so many links.
I'm just going to share my screen. Find the correct screen. Right, how's that?
Oh, look at that. How did you zoom in? So I think it's best if everyone can just sort of screenshot those that want it and take a picture of it, whatever works. But it's a really good one. And the talk, I think, from Atos is online as well, available. So it's definitely worth listening to.
And you can access this from the URLs there from hero.uk/stories/climate change. Right. I'll stop sharing that now. So thank you so much, Adnan, for sharing that. Rabia, you have been an absolute gem. We have loved having you. Thank you to our audience again for joining us. And Isha, we are looking forward to our next Sunnah Fast. Rabia, you're going to say a quick bye to us? Enjoy.
You got away.
See you. Right. Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everybody.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Bye.